Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, a podcast to encourage, educate, and equip you to care for children and youth through adoption, foster, and kinship care. Hosted by an adoptive mom with over 22 years of kinship and adoptive parenting experience. She's on this journey with you. Please welcome Sandra Flach.
Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies, and not one of them is forgotten before God? Why, even the hairs on your head are all numbered. Fear not, you are of more value than many sparrows. That is Luke chapter 12, verses 6 and 7. I'm your host, Sandra Flach. I can't read that scripture or those 2 verses without thinking of our kids with all of their trauma, with all of their big behaviors, which are really symptoms of the trauma, and prenatal exposure, possibly. Even our precious kiddos are just so loved by the Lord beyond what we can imagine, made in his image, of great value and precious to him. And we're on this journey to be able to be the parents that they need. The Lord set them in our families, and he will equip us for whatever we need to be able to support them and advocate for them and love them and raise them. But we can't do it without him. And it also is really not done very well if we're trying to do it on our own without community. We need our people, we need our tribe, and I hope you find community through this podcast. I'm grateful that you tune in, whether this is your first time or you are a faithful listener. I'm grateful to have you here. This is another episode, September episode, where we're going to focus on fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. FASD is a big part of my parenting journey with my kiddos, and September is International FASD Awareness Month. I feel like it seems not a lot of people really know about FASD. It's not just a child welfare or foster and adoption issue, because it affects 1 in 20 school-age children across the United States, but it's also around the world. And if you just search out social media, you'll find FASD UK, FASD Australia, FASD Ireland, FASD New Zealand. Like there's FASD Scotland. It's a global issue. And FASD is the leading cause of developmental and learning disabilities worldwide. So it's relevant to our parenting journey if we're parenting children, especially those of us caring for kids who've come to us through adoption, through foster care, through kinship. It's highly likely because there's a large prevalence of alcohol exposure in the population of children that we serve, but it's not just in the population of children that we serve. But either way, there are so many struggling families. My family was one of those struggling families. Some days we are still struggling because it is a difficult journey. But I want to equip you and I want you to learn what I've learned. I'm still learning. And I don't want you to feel alone on your parenting journey. And I talk about FASD a lot, but the primary symptoms of FASD often overlap with the signs and symptoms of childhood trauma. So whether or not you know that your child was prenatally exposed, maybe they were not, but they have significant trauma. What we talk about when it comes to FASD applies to all of our kids, really, because we need to be able to better support them and understand that their brains have been impacted by childhood trauma, whether that was trauma that happened in utero or early childhood. Either way, it affects them, and the symptoms of that are often in what we see as challenging behaviors, but we can support them and we can bring them to great levels of healing, and help them to be all that God created them to be. So that's what we talk about here on this podcast. And again, this is FASD Awareness Month. So all of our episodes throughout September are going to be focused on FASD. And today we have a special guest with us, an FASD expert, a doctor. But before we get to her, I do want to share some of our resources, especially for those of us raising kids who have been prenatally exposed to alcohol or other drugs, whether they've been diagnosed or not. So give a listen to this resource and I'll catch you on the other side.
Sandra Flach, host of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, and FASD educator Debbie Raymond invite you to join Hope for the FASD Journey, a virtual support community for parents and caregivers raising individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, diagnosed or not. This faith-based support community meets online 3 times each month, features special VIP guests, and a private Facebook group for members only, which includes Soul Care Saturday video devotionals led by Sandra and Deb. Both Sandra and Deb are adoptive moms raising kids with FASD and facilitators of the Facets Neurobehavioral Model. For details and to register, visit justicefororphans.ny.org/hope-community. That's justicefororphans.ny.org/hope-community.
So, as a mom of an 18 and 21-year-old, both diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome, adopted internationally, I spent years trying to figure out what was going on with my kiddos. We became trauma informed, which definitely helped. I highly recommend and fully endorse the connected parenting strategies. Love Dr. Karen Purvis. And all of those strategies worked. I still use those strategies. But still, like, what is going on, right? And we had attachment, we had connection, was giving choices, yeses, disarming fear with a lot of play and fun, and things were working, but there was still just things that I was like, what is going on here? So, I want to be able to provide that help and that support to you if you find that sounds like your journey, right? So, in addition to the support community, which I just love and look forward to, the 3 Tuesday nights that we are together via Zoom. We have moms and some dads come on occasionally. We have one brave dad that will join us, but it is open to dads as well. But we meet in Zoom and we just learn from one another, support one another. We have special guests on sometimes. In fact, our guest on the podcast today was actually a guest in our support group. And we just support one another and we pray for one another. And I've said it before, I think, to my knowledge, our Hope for the FASD Journey support group is the only faith-based FASD support group in the world. So we pray for one another. We have a private Facebook group. If you're a member of our support community, you get to be a member of the private Facebook group where we put in prayer requests and encouragement. And then every Saturday, there's a video devotional recorded by myself or Debbie Raymond, the other mom who co-leads the group with me, and just want to encourage you in your relationship with the Lord and your relationship with your kids, and help us each on this journey. I like to think of it as linking arms together and being on this journey together. So I hope you'll consider the group if that is something you're interested in. There is a small monthly fee of $15 a month. And that just helps our nonprofit, Justice for Orphans, be able to do all the things that we need to do to be able to provide the group and the facilitators of the group and all of the things, that the time and everything that goes into that. However, we never want that to be a reason why someone can't be part of the group. So we never want the fee to be prohibitive. So if you really want to be part of the group, but the $15 a month just doesn't work in your family budget, reach out to me, because we do have scholarships, and we will make it happen so that you can be part of the group. So having said all of that, in addition to the support group, I also offer online and in-person trainings. So I do want to tell you that I'm going to be doing some traveling coming up. So if you are in any of these places or want to get to any of these places, I'd love to connect with you in person. So in September, I will be at the Christian Alliance for Orphans Summit in Nashville. And I'm blank on the dates, but I do believe it's like the 19th and the 20th, right around there. It's Wednesday through Friday. I will be doing a roundtable discussion on FASD, and I will have an exhibitor booth. So if you are there, stop by the booth or come to the roundtable and connect with me. We are going to be doing some free giveaways of some of our upcoming workshops and whatnot. So check us out there. And then I have a free online Intro to FASD workshop coming up. That is on Thursday, September 26th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And then in October, we're also going to begin the deep dive into FASD. This is an online workshop. I use the Facets neurobehavioral model. It is 6 3-hour sessions. They are on Wednesdays, starting October 2nd. At noon Eastern Time. So it'll go from noon to 3 p.m. Eastern Time every Wednesday at that time, starting October 2nd through November 16th. So there is a fee, of course, for that, because that's 18 hours of content. You get a certificate of completion. So to sign up for that training, you would go to our website, or any of our trainings, the free intro, or the 18-hour, you would go to our website, justicefororphansny.org, and then you would click on registration, and you would see the different trainings that we offer, and you can click on one, so you can sign up for those. I will also be in October. I will be in Chicago for the Replanted Conference, where I am teaching a breakout session on FASD. So I will be there. And then in November, if you are in upstate New York, or anywhere in New York and you want to drive, I am going to be at a conference in Lake George in November. I don't have those dates on the top of my head, but it's a child care conference, and they have invited me to come and teach a breakout session on FASD there. So I'll be there. So I travel, and I know in January, I will be leading a retreat for foster and adoptive moms down in Florida. Sees the connection. So I'm so super excited to be part of that. So we'll start posting those dates and where I'm going to be on our social media. If you're able to get out and connect with me, I would love to connect with you. You can follow us on social media as well. At Justice for Orphans has both an Instagram and a Facebook. Also me, Sandra Flach. I'm on both of those platforms. And links to the website, justicefororphansny.org, will be in the show notes. Also, this podcast is also posted on YouTube in video form, and you would follow the Justice for Orphans YouTube channel if you would like to watch this podcast. Okay, all of those things aside, now let's get to our guest, Dr. Jackie Pei. Dr. Pei is professor and director of training for the School and Clinical Child Psychology program at the University of Alberta College of Social Sciences and Humanities, and the assistant clinical professor in the Department of Pediatrics, member, Women and Children's Health Research Institute. She is an intervention research lead for the Canada FASD Research Network. She is a professional expert in FASD, and we are going to learn a ton from her. Please welcome Dr. Jackie Pei. Hi, Dr. Pei. Jackie.
Jackie, yes.
Yes. Welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. Thanks, Sandra, for having me.
Oh, I'm excited. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us. We got to meet in our support group where you were a VIP guest a while back, and I know all of our support group members were riveted to everything that you were saying. And we got so much out of it, and I just, really wanted all of our listeners on the podcast to be able to hear from you as well. So thanks so much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love to do this. I love to talk.
Me too. Me too.
Oh, we're really in trouble today. Away we go.
Yes, I hear you, because that's how you get a podcast, right? You like to talk. So, so let's dive in. I read your, introduction. I read your bio. You're doing amazing work. You're a professional. But how did you come to specialize in FASD? Tell us that journey about how you learned about it and became passionate about it.
Oh gosh, yeah. I always have to think back through this story, and because it's always this interesting, number of different things always intersect in one's life. You know that, right? It's never a straight line. And I find that over and over again. So my journey has kind of taken me through different careers and different experiences. And once upon a time, I actually had a criminology degree as my starting point. And I first worked as a forensic therapist working with young offenders in correctional facilities. I loved the work. I really loved the work. And I talk about this a lot, that it was a really important learning experience, because I got into that work thinking, oh yeah, I don't even know what I think. I think I was kind of coming from my little privileged space of kind of, naivety or something. And I don't know if I thought I was fixing the world. I don't know what I thought, but I was going to go in and make those bad kids good, or I was young, I was whatever. But what happened is a couple of things. And one of the things that happened is I started working with these youth, and I really liked them. I found them engaging and interesting. And I really had a difficult time always understanding, wait a minute, you did this thing. And so all of a sudden these connections between behavior and person became more perplexing and complex to me. And that challenged me. And that made me really think about who I am and all my judgments and assumptions and all of these kind of things, but also what's at the root of these things and behavior, and why do some of these things happen? And I became more curious. The second thing that happened is that I found that there were a number of kiddos that I worked with who were wonderful, and they would do some really remarkable things in the therapy and the sessions and the treatment programs we were providing. And then all of a sudden they would do something really unexpected. And I was like, okay, this is not making sense. Like something's not fitting here. What's happening? And these kiddos really want to succeed, and this isn't working. Like, are we dropping the ball? Like, what's happening? So ultimately, this curiosity about understanding a little bit more about what drives behavior, and being really actually passionate about these kiddos who I decided were some of my favorite people to interact with, and feeling the pieces weren't fitting. I thought, I got to go back to school. It was the only solution I could find. So I thought, oh, here I go back to school. Went back to school and did my master's, my Ph.D. And over the time started to pull together different pieces of, environmental impacts on behavior, and how things like trauma can impact us, and ultimately brain-based influences on behavior, and how brain-based differences can really influence. And through this course and through this interaction, and even through some interactions I had in my early forensic days, I started to hear about FAS, and some of it was through a colleague who was raising kiddos with FAS when I was young, and I had some real experiences there that were shocking and striking, to my practicum and internship type experiences in my later training, where I got to interact with folks with FASD. And I started to experience this intersection of environment and brain-based differences, and individuals who had some really wonderful and unique personalities and were trying to make it work. And I think as these things came together, I just became increasingly compelled by the challenge of supporting success with this group, while also recognizing the heartache and the difficulty that caregivers, families, and individuals were experiencing. and the complexity of the challenge to understand how do we create the right kind of environments and the right fit to have spaces that will really work for these kiddos. So it was a journey, I think, of personal learning and reflection, having some of these personal experiences, interacting with kiddos with FASD in lots of different ways that kind of gradually evolved both my intellectual curiosity, but also my heartstrings and my space where I said, this is more than an intellectual challenge. This is something that resonates for me at a different level. And I don't know. That's my meandering journey. Sandra, I think I tell it different every time. I don't even know, but it kind of takes you through the pieces.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense because I think all of us are on this meandering journey trying to figure out, especially parents like myself and those listening, what's going on here? What could this be? Because some of us know, like my children, I knew they were prenatally exposed. They got a diagnosis when they were 6 and 8. Now they're almost 19 and one just turned 21. But a lot of parents, especially those parents who are fostering kids, we don't get that history. We don't know that. So we're trying to always figure it out and be curious. And, so what did you have an aha moment where you were like, FASD is my life's work kind of thing, like where that was where you just know? Because when you were talking about in those days when you were, working with incarcerated youth, I know there's this statistics, I don't know them specifically out there, but there's a high rate of individuals, incarcerated individuals who've spent time in the foster care system. And there's also a high rate of prenatal exposure among children in child welfare. So it seems like there's a common thread through here, right? So what was your aha moment where you really wanted to zero in on FASD?
Gosh, that's a super question. I don't know that there was one. I think, back when I was doing that work, FASD was not something we talked about. I mean, I hate to confess
Right.
these things, but that was the early 90s. And
Yeah.
so back then, it wasn't, my introduction to FAS, which was what was being referred to at that time, was through, a personal connection and a personal experience with her children with FAS. So I didn't even really put together the correctional element and FAS at that time. I knew something wasn't right. I knew something was different. And I had this FAS thing in my head for a personal reason, but I hadn't put it together. And it was only through the later journey that it started to it kind of just kept bubbling up. Like Sandra, it was sort of like, oh, then I do this, and all of a sudden there's something about FAS. And then I did this a practicum with some really super supervisors who did work with folks with FAS. And I'm like, oh, wait, here it is again. And so it was almost like I less of an epiphany and more of just this recurrent experience where I'm like, okay, I gotta stop looking away from this because every time I, turn a corner, there it is again. This is something that is demanding my attention. And not that I had resistance, but I think that's what it was, is that it just kept coming and coming up and up um and I think that my experiences certainly with families, but first of all, even before families, it was my experience was worth the youth. And through some of my training, the experiences I had with my youth, um, maybe those were some of the moments. I think I've told you about moments I had where and I still work in a lot of forensic settings, and where I've walked into these settings, and I talk about this too, where generally when you work in forensic settings, you walk in and everybody goes the other way, right? Or else they give you really dirty looks or worse or whatever, right? Like it's usually not a, hey, yay, there's Jackie. And I've had a few kids, and one kid in particular, I walked in once into the cafeteria area and he saw me from across the crowded cafeteria and smiles, a beautiful beaming smile, and room across the Jackie. And I'm like, whoa, dude, even I'm embarrassed right now. Everyone else in the institution is like, whoa, but I was so warmed and worried, and I just felt all of these things come to play. And I've had that reaction so many times that maybe it's less an epiphany and more, oh man, just this space where it is one of the most rewarding and most memorable kinds of interpersonal interactions that I get to have. And so I think that's what actually really just drew me in. So there's this kept reoccurring, but it ultimately I was drawn in and felt really committed to this area of work because of these kiddos.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just couldn't not.
Yeah. Because they have such big personalities, right?
They're big and they're warm and
Yeah.
they see good and kindness in ways that for all of the challenge and all of the difficulty and yeah, some days are ooh, but there are these moments where you almost feel like you're seen through. I don't know
Yeah.
what it is. And it seems like, that the barriers, and there's just this ability to see us differently that I don't know what that is. There's no science talk in here right now.
Yeah.
I'm just saying for me and as a person, there's something really, really special that I would never change. And for all the challenges, I would never, ever change. This is, my favorite group of folks to interact with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know and as a parent, I can see, my two boys have just wonderful personalities. They're
Yeah.
fun, they're funny. But oh, do we have hard days, right? And understanding now it's a brain thing helps to put that into perspective, so you can still just really love this kiddo and understand, we're not having a good brain day, and
Yeah.
it's not, me butting heads with my kid as much as it's, I heard it from another adopted mom who described it as it's me and my kid against their brain today because things aren't going well that way, right? And if we can understand, the brain difference, it can really help in building that relationship um with our kiddos. So Jackie, did you like once you figured out, okay, there's this common theme of, FASD, the prenatal alcohol exposure, did you like start taking like, researching and exploring all of that? Like, so how did that come about? How did you really like learn about FASD specifically and the impacts on the brain and all of that?
Yeah, I really started to jump into that in my doctoral training, and at that time I was really shifting into sort of the neuropsychology space, which is kind of understanding the intersection between brain and behavior in terms of just what you're saying. Sometimes that brain doesn't do what we expect it to do, and there can be real challenges, and that was really compelling to me and became a real central part of my research and study and learning. And so in the course of doing that, I became really interested in the ways in which the brain supports or doesn't support both kind of goal-directed behavior, like I can have an intention, I can really want something, but I can't quite get there.
Mhm.
And that was really interesting to me because, I always kind of take for granted. I got an idea, I go do my idea. Like, and the idea that realizing the number of brain networks and elements and processing required to actually get from idea to action, really I found intriguing and compelling, and unpacking that started to reveal to me the amazing and dynamic nature of our brain. I actually, next to FASD, the brain, I'm a tremendous brain geek now, and I think brains are
Yeah.
remarkable. And I'm like, what? I can't even believe it ever gets it right up there.
I know.
Amazing.
I know.
So that really became compelling to me, and parallel to that was the topic of memory, and part of that relates to how we advance our progress towards those goals, but memory is even to me more interesting in that I think it in many ways defines who we are, because
Mm,
we're a product of what we remember.
right.
And while I may feel things and experience things, I always associate it with some kind of memory or some kind of thing or something, whatever, when I talk about myself. So memory is not only what I do, but it's often how I see myself and how I interpret myself. So it takes on this really interesting nuance. So those areas I got really excited about, and that's where I spent my time doing some of my dissertation work. And And I was really excited also to think about the way clinical practice. So I'm a clinician too, and I like to always bring the clinical work and the research together and say, hey, where does the rubber meet the road? Like,
Mm.
I want to I want to know how to make sense and how to make that make sense actually have an impact. And so it was interesting for me to try to link some of the things that we do clinically with understanding. And I really started in that space. Let me understand the memory differences. Let me understand the differences in this goal-directed behavior or executive functions or some of these spaces. Let me kind of start to unpack that. So I did that work. And that was really, I think, the start of my research journey, and then my postdoctoral work kind of followed along those lines, and then I was fortunate to end up working after all that in one of our hospitals where we provided clinical services for folks with FASD here in Edmonton in Canada. And so my primary role was providing assessment and follow-up and all sorts of services to families and individuals with FASD. And in that capacity, we also had an associated research element attached to our clinical services. So that was really nice because I also kind of got to marry these two things. And as time wore on, I ended up moving into the university so that research became a bigger role, but I'm still fortunate to get to maintain some of my clinical pieces. So my distribution of work has shifted over the years, but I continue to have the opportunity to sort of work in a clinical space, which I think kind of demands a little bit more curiosity and relevance. I think I'll say that like to the now. And then my research, I get to still kind of taste the ideas and think through things. And sometimes those questions that my clients and families come to me with, I'm like, ooh, that's a super research question. Hang on a minute. Let me take that to my other space and see what we can do. So I love that interplay. So that's kind of how it all
Yeah.
rolled out, Sandra.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it makes me want to think, because when you were working in the clinic with families, were you part of diagnosing? Because I know I hear from parents all the time, and families in our support group, in which are all, in the United States, the people that are in our support group, but people all over the world can listen to the podcast. But it is hard to get a diagnosis. My boys got the diagnosis. And I think part of that was because they were adopted internationally. We had information, translated in their adoption documents that stated that the parents had been alcoholics, the birth parents. They had the facial features, they had, all of the primary symptoms. So it wasn't hard to get a diagnosis from a developmental pediatrician. But I hear from families all the time in my state and across the United States that it's so hard to get a diagnosis. So what can you speak about that to us?
I don't even know what to say. That's a great question, Sandra. And I think the issue of equitable access to service and starting with diagnosis to get that understanding, I think is an enormous problem we face in our field. And yes, it was a diagnostic clinic I worked on, and I have a really the good fortune of being in a province in Canada where we still won't have enough service. We still have lots of folks waiting in the long waiting lists and things like that, but we have a lot of diagnostic clinics here for our population base, relatively speaking, right? We have access in a way that's I think really supportive and helpful to families. And I certainly, I know your families are going to be hearing this and saying, yeah, Jackie, that, diagnosis is important for several reasons. One of them is because it provides that understanding. And I love what you said about that one mom that said, me and my child against their brain. And everyone finds their own way to frame things. But I sometimes feel that going through that process sort of validates those approaches. And people are like, okay, now this is for real thing. Like, we're not just
Right.
making it up. We're not just making excuses. Hey, schools, this is real. We're not just saying this. Like it's a backstop for things that you guys know that you're already kind of doing. And I think that's super important. I think it validates, I think it provides that understanding. I also think that the process, not just the diagnosis, not just the thing, but the actual getting an assessment to actually learn what is unique. And when I learn what's unique, then maybe I learn what some of the strengths and pathways to success might look like. And I feel a little bit more informed, because it's tricky to kind of figure it out as you go. I sometimes think about it as learning another language, right? I can either go to classes and take classes where somebody explains how to learn the language and this is what this means, and it's still going to be hard and I'm still going to have to work at it and practice lots, but I'm going to learn the language probably faster than if you drop me in a country and just say, figure it out, Jackie, right? Like, drop me in a country and give me a tutor, give me somebody who teaches me and explains me. I'm going to do better than if you just drop me alone, where I have to just trial and error it. And so I feel the assessment is like having that trainer, tutor next to you while you're in that country learning that language, to help provide the explanation, to say, oh yeah, wait, no, you use that word wrong. That actually is interpreted this way. It's like a translational service, right? It's a translational service. And it helps us acquire that language of understanding that allows our kids and adults and people in our lives to experience success. Because so often when your brain is working differently, it's not an issue of you know, I don't want to do it, or even sometimes it's not even an issue of I can't do it. It's that things are getting lost in translation. And so we just need to shift our processes of interpretation, understanding, and responding in order to find the pathways towards what that good fit is going to look like. And it doesn't mean it's going to look like, you know, anything I know or I'm familiar with, but that's translational services. So I know I'm preaching to the choir and everybody's going to listen to this and they're going to say, yeah, Jackie, we already know that. So what do we do about it? And I think that's the $1 million question. I think, what are we going to do about it? I think the challenge to the research community, and I think they're embracing it a bit right now, or they're sort of working towards it, is to say, how do we streamline the assessment and diagnostic process? Can we create screening tools? Can we, you know, step it so that we can more rapidly put people into sort of pathways where the amount of services required for a diagnosis are less? Because as long as we have, you know, lots of services needed, that sometimes slows things down in terms of, you know, who can make the diagnosis and how much do they need to know. So I think there's some efforts being made to say, if we can provide screening tools and things like that, that might create pathways to service. I think there are folks who are saying, what can we do in training programs? How do we boost the educational level of all of our frontline professionals to be conversant in FASD and even know that there's a referral or something needed? Because at this point in time, awareness is still lagging in an enormous way. And so until we can start boosting that, so I think there's elements of how do we elevate kind of public awareness, but how do we also build professional awareness? And what does that look like within professional societies, within educational programs, post-secondary education? And I know there are a few folks that are starting to kind of tackle that within research setting, but I think it has to happen. Because we currently do not have the capacity to meet the need. There is a tremendous gap. And, you know, and I can't speak for the US, and I know your health structures and things are considerably different than ours. But I also think that there is a political space that can be held here. And certainly looking at the way our you know, policies and the political will comes behind sort of increasing equitable access to this really important service is sometimes a game changer. Because sometimes if the policy and the political will is there, then all of a sudden the money, the clinics, the training, and everything else kind of follow. So I think the grassroots initiatives and the continuing to vocalize and highlight the need. I think the research initiatives that say, hey, here are some more efficient pathways, here's some important awareness, here's some training, you know, protocols and components. These things might come together to continue applying pressure and hopefully moving us towards a bit of a tipping point where folks will begin to fully invest in the identification of FASD, because only then are we going to be able to provide the kinds of translational services to families, communities, educators, employment services, etc., that are going to facilitate success for our people. And I think that's going to be really, I think that's important. So I know that's kind of a long and meandering answer.
No, it's great.
I don't think it's an easy one. It's one that I know I hear about a lot as we all struggle with it.
Yes. Yeah. Here in the US as well, it varies by state. You probably know the state of Minnesota is leaps and bounds ahead of most of the other states. I'm in New York State, and it's, my youngest, with diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome, he just qualified for services for persons with developmental disabilities in our state, but not because of the FASD, because that is not recognized, but because his IQ is low enough to get him that diagnosis as a person with an intellectual disability. But we have been working, and folks like Dr. Christy Petrenko, who I'm sure that folks in New York have been working in the FASD community in New York have been working hard to try to get FASD recognized as a developmental disability by our state, and so far it has not been. So that's a battle, and I think it's the same all over, and it's just doing that hard work, and I think parents are a big part of pushing that. But I wanted to get to when it comes to diagnoses, because so many times, I mean, we've heard, I know families who've had to cross state lines, drive 10 hours and cross state lines to get to another state to get a diagnosis. And here in New York, families have to either go, to the clinic in Rochester where Dr. Petrenko is. And I'm in the capital region. So it's like a 5-6 hour drive to get out there. And there's a 1.5 year waiting list. I think there's one professional in New York City, and the developmental pediatrician more locally who diagnosed my boys, way back in the day. I've sent local families there, and they don't get the diagnosis most of the time. It's almost, so I don't know. It's like, I know, I'm not a professional and I can't diagnose, but mom to mom, and I know enough of the history to know, like, you need to go get this child diagnosed, but yet they come back with, a piece of paper where the doctor said, this is your roadmap. And it's, drawing of the facial features. It's all these things, these list of symptoms. And he's basically saying on a piece of paper, your child has this, but yet does not give a diagnosis. Doesn't, come back next year and we'll look at it. We'll revisit this. So it's so frustrating here. So Jackie, what would be like, if an individual comes in, a child comes in that you're going to evaluate or screen for an FASD, what things currently are you, and I know this is, maybe more so in Canada, right? What do you look for in an individual in order to diagnose?
Oh, yeah. I'm totally reflecting on this. I got to tell you, even I will answer the question, but as you're talking, I just continue to have reverberating in my head, stigma and these hidden visible barriers that I start to get all agitated.
Me too.
But, yeah, I'm like, but anyway, I will focus on. So in Canada, we have national guidelines. So we do have a sort of national diagnostic guidelines that are applied across Canada. And the guidelines kind of provide our gold standard. And then, depending on where folks are, they work to the best of their capacity to work within that gold standard, depending on what they can do. And within that gold standard, often we employ a multidisciplinary team, meaning that there would be like a physician, a psychologist, maybe speech language, an OT, depending on age, different folks, social worker, or somebody kind of a community, knowledgeable person. And who's present can be a variety of those folks, depending on what your community capacity is, who's around, who's available. It can structure sometimes very formally and sometimes very informally. And then what do we look for? Certainly confirmed prenatal alcohol exposure. That's the trickiest one. That's kind of, I call that the sticky wicket, because it comes with so many different things, and how you address that, confirm that, and how do you work in the absence of that is I think a really complex challenge that we face, with lots of different implications depending on which way you go. So I think back to that giant word stigma that sits here on our shoulders as we talk about this. Then we spend time, and while there's a medical assessment, a lot of the assessment is sort of a psychological cognitive assessment where we look at different areas of brain functioning and determine the breadth, sort of the number of areas of brain-based functioning affected, and the depth, the degree of that effect. And if we can see, 3 areas of brain-based functioning that are significantly impaired, and there's prenatal alcohol exposure, generally speaking, that will translate to a diagnosis. I mean, I'm simplifying it. There's
Yeah, sure.
rule out stuff, but that's generally like the formalized structure process that's recommended by our Canadian guidelines.
Yeah. And what if there's not prenatal exposure, or not, I should say, admission is what I mean to say. What if there's not that admission to prenatal exposure? So maybe the child is in the child welfare system. Birth mom is not in the picture and nobody really knows, but maybe there's a suspicion we know she did drugs, but we don't know about alcohol, that kind of thing. Like, do you just, lean towards most likely there was prenatal exposure, or does it disqualify a diagnosis altogether because there wasn't that maternal admission? How do you navigate that?
Oh, I think that's a clinic by clinic. To be honest, I think that there's a lot of discretion that goes into it and a lot of care. And I know a lot of our clinics in Canada, and I'm probably internationally, I'm not working on a multidisciplinary clinic right now. So, but I know that, some of the ones that I still associate with and work with a little bit or interact with a little bit, they're often in communication and working through some of this. I think they've become very good at seeking sort of collateral information or other information that might provide them what they need to know in order to feel, confident in saying that they feel as though there had been this prenatal exposure to alcohol. But I do think that there are certainly times when the information is absent, or the information presented is contrary to a diagnosis or something like that, where they're in a position where they're like, yeah, we can't actually in good conscience say that we have any kind of reliable evidence here to suggest that there was prenatal alcohol consumption. And so that's a tricky space. And I think, like I said, how they draw that line, how they navigate the process, it looks different. When there's, no contact with biomom, that becomes really tricky, and what kind of collateral information is available really depends on when and how the kids were involved in the system and who continues to be involved. I mean, I know, again, I'm preaching to the choir when I'm sharing all of the challenges associated, but generally speaking, in the absence of confirmed prenatal alcohol, then kiddos will not get a diagnosis. They will still get an assessment. They'll still get recommendations. They may get other sort of diagnoses or statements or comments that are made in an effort to reflect what their needs are and to still create pathways for success for them and to look at what that means. But no, without that confirmed alcohol.
Yeah. And that's the challenging part for so many of our, especially in the adoption and foster care community, because we don't necessarily know, or we can highly suspect, but can't confirm. And then, they don't get the diagnosis, but just because they don't get the diagnosis doesn't mean they don't have it. It's just that it cannot be confirmed. Right. So then it has to be looked at as, like, I like what you're saying, as, even without the actual diagnosis, what is going on and how can we support, what is needed here, because that they're still going to need help and support, therapies and different things moving forward to be successful. So thank you I know it was not an easy question. There's not an easy answer to that question.
No, there's really not, Sandra. But I think I just to really emphasize something you just said there. I think, diagnosis is sometimes it's nice to just have the knowledge and to know, right?
Yeah.
I get that. But actually, practically speaking, the translational information is not dependent on the diagnosis. I can still tell you all the same information and all of the things that folks would need to know in order to provide support without a diagnosis. All that same information can be provided. The flip there in those situations is compelling our systems of support to actually be responsive to functional needs and translational services, so to speak, as I keep calling them, in the absence of a diagnosis. So if we can remove diagnostic gatekeepers and say, no, this isn't, we can utilize this functional information, which is really going to be helpful. This is actually, your diagnosis doesn't tell me anything about what you need. It may tell me that your brain is affected, and it tells me maybe that this service or this service can now be accessed should those diagnoses open those service doors. But it doesn't actually tell me what is unique about your brain. And as we know, there's tremendous difference and diversity within our FASD population. So while I'm a big proponent of diagnostic services, I'm actually a bigger fan, if I really put my fangirl hat on, I'm a bigger fan of assessment, really good assessment practice, an assessment practice that provides us that meaningful roadmap, that practical kind of sense of, what might work, might not, what do I need to understand about this person's brain?
Yeah.
The barrier to this approach is that our services are sometimes diagnostic dependent. Like you got to get through the door before I can use the roadmap.
Right.
And there again, we step into political and system realms where we say, if we're having trouble with some of these things, then I mean, there are other reasons why diagnosis matters, and it helps with prevalence, and it helps with funding, and it helps with prevention initiatives and all that stuff. But when I'm talking about kiddos, when I'm talking about people, as long as I can get in the service door, the roadmap is actually what provides the translational service.
Yeah. And I do think that sometimes, a lot of times parents struggle with, having, say we have a teenager who came to us through the foster care system. We know mom maybe had a history of drug use, no longer in the picture. Nobody knows where she is, never got, that maternal admission. Kid may have an IEP at school for some learning challenges, but now as a teenager, and now there's a whole bunch of things going on, which to the school system look like behavioral, lazy kid, defiant kid, apathetic kid. He just doesn't want to get up for school, doesn't want to do his schoolwork, doesn't in trouble all the time. So they've marked the behavior, right? That's defining the kid, and refuse to even consider the possibility that, there could be prenatal exposure. And, parents have not been able to get a diagnosis, because there's not maternal admission, even though, we know the primary symptoms, say, of prenatal exposure, right? The primary symptoms being, executive function challenges, short-term memory, language, communication, sensory, slower processing pace, all of those things, right? All of those things are going on, but yet there's not a diagnosis. So the school system just sees the student as, a kid who's lazy and doesn't want to apply himself and, just in trouble all the time. So then it becomes frustrating for the parent and for the student because they're not able to get the help that the student really needs to be successful in the school environment.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I mean, I think rightly, wrongly, or otherwise, I mean, I don't know, the diagnosis, having that thing, seems to be the key that prepares people to then shift their attributional thinking and accept your roadmap. The fact that you can't come and say, oh, they have a different brain, here's the roadmap. People are like, yeah, unless you call it something, I don't believe your roadmap.
Right. Yeah.
So there's something in our stuff, and you're right, Sandra, it's not just our systems. I mean, I do believe it's systems and it's a gatekeeper and it's all that, but there's more than that, because it's also in the way we as human beings work. It's like, until you tell me you have a diagnosis, I don't actually believe your roadmap.
Exactly.
And it's like,
that's what's going on. Yeah.
But it's the same thing, people, but we don't. And somehow hearing a diagnosis, people say, oh, you have a thing. Now, all of a sudden, I can switch gears, switch perception, and I can begin at least to accept some element of that roadmap better than otherwise. So it definitely changes the conversation, and it's an efficient approach to communication that can shift perspectives of folks rapidly, and then readies them to utilize the more involved, roadmaps and informational pieces, translational pieces, as I keep referring to them. And I think that that's a practical piece. I would love to see us evolve in that. And again, I would love to see our training and things like that prepare people, not to demote diagnosis. I'm not seeking to do that at all, but I would love if we get better at just providing good services to kids because they need good services.
Yeah.
And when we have that piece of information, awesome, we have a diagnosis. And in the event that we don't have that piece of information, we still are able to provide good services to kids because we still have a roadmap. I don't know what that will take in our training models and our ways of supporting systems. I know we have a few systems that, here in Canada are attempting to explore function-based service allocation and looking at what that looks like and how you distribute services differently that aren't just diagnostically driven. But that bears lots of complications too. And also, nothing's easy. And at the end of the day, we need people to invest meaningfully in the well-being of all people in our population. And that means, this equitable access that you and I keep circling around. At the end of the day, there's not going to be a cheap solution. We actually need to have folks investing in the well-being of folks with FASD.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I want to just circle back around. You mentioned, we might not have a diagnosis, but, the assessment piece. So, and then you can correct me if I have it all wrong, but, you get all of the professionals together to do that assessment for the individual. We don't have maternal admission, so we can't confirm FASD, but, this individual does show slow processing pace, short-term memory problems, some language and communication challenges. Those things that we know are, they could be from trauma, right? But also there are also those primary symptoms of FASD. So having that spelled out, is that the roadmap that can be spelled out? So whether or not we have the diagnosis, these things are still the reality for this child, and this child needs supports across environments to help them with these symptoms that they have of whatever the condition may be, even if we can't confirm FASD.
100%. That's exactly what I'm saying. I really think that, that information is ultimately, with or without diagnosis, potentially going to be the same. And it's that information that makes a really big difference. And it's that should people be willing to accept that information and work from that new kind of revised roadmap, I think it really equips them to, actually have a bit more understanding of underlying pieces, so they can actually kind of work with this individual to find those solutions and those ways forward, because you're creating that reframing, you're creating a slightly different space where they understand that there are some brain-based differences.
Yes.
And so this individual is going to operate a little bit differently. So, hey, let's all work together to figure out solutions that help to do this. And I think that's where, when we have assessment opportunities, when I say we now, I'm talking to me and my colleagues as professionals, have a real responsibility to create a translational roadmap that says this is meaningful. So I might say, for example, yeah, I saw Johnny in my clinic and gosh, Johnny is a sweetheart with a great smile and a really robust, vibrant personality. And boy, can he tell a story. And when he gets going, he tells that story. It's brilliant and it's amazing. And you know what? A lot of times we hear him talk and we'll hear his language, and he sounds really competent and sounds quite knowledgeable, and he sounds like he really understands things. But what we all need to know is, while he's highly enthusiastic and motivated to engage and belong, he actually struggles to receive and understand and integrate language in the same way. So that means just because he can say it doesn't mean he understands it. And just because he describes something, it doesn't mean he can actually do the thing, because those are separate actions. So we need to know that just hearing it doesn't mean he can do it or he can understand it. So our job as professionals or people or caregivers would be to say, oh, Let's unpack the steps, or let's check for understanding. And just because you used a word doesn't mean you know what it means. It just could be.
Right.
And so that kind of provision of information can reflect a whole lot of underlying brain-based elements that, when coming from a professional in assessment, can sometimes just bolster what caregivers already know and have been telling people all the time. But now all of a sudden it's real,
Yeah.
right? But then, say, for example, if we're going to just say teacher, for example, it could be an employer as well, was able to say, oh, so I can't decide that this person is this capable because of what they express. Because our number one way of kind of assessing somebody's capability is their expressive language.
Mm.
And we're actually terrible at accessing, just in an interaction, unless you're a specialist, the actual quality of your language. So sometimes if somebody just produces lots of words and can be kind of engaging, we hear that as, oh, they're smart, they're capable. And so we put all our expectations at that same level. So a translational report and an assessment where they can unpack some of their language-based skills to say, yeah, they can sometimes express, or at least sound really good.
Yeah.
If you listen carefully, there's not a lot of integration of ideas. It's usually self-directed, not reciprocal. It isn't stuff that they can actually enact. Then we start to unpack the stuff behind it, which helps evolve the story from, oh, they're not doing it because they don't care, or they're ignoring me, or they're defiant or oppositional, into, oh, there's actually brain-based differences that are affecting their ability to follow through on those instructions. Okay, I get it. Oh, just because they sound good doesn't mean that they fully understand. Okay, I get it. We need to backtrack. And then we can enlist educators, for example, to be part of the solution. And we can say, all right, so let's celebrate their expressive, and fluent skill set, and say, this is awesome. And then still always backtrack the understanding, backtrack the instructions, slow it down, structure it more. Let's see how that works. So then we've created a roadmap, and I don't need a diagnosis to engage that roadmap, as long as that educator believes that this is brain-based in the absence of a diagnosis.
Yeah. And that's where the problem is, or the challenge, I should say, is to educate the educators and anyone, parents, caregivers, anyone, interacting with this, child or individual, because it's brain-based and we have to have that understanding. Gosh, I could talk with you all day long. But I guess we need to land the plane somewhere. But so I guess because of our listeners are primarily adoptive and foster parents, some may have a diagnosis or know that there was prenatal exposure, some not. What would be your advice to parents who maybe are seeing these symptoms, these behavioral symptoms, with language and communication and, all of those things that we were just talking about, memory, and the list goes on, impulsivity, all of those things, what would be your encouragement or advice that you could offer to our parents listening? What do we do?
Okay, well, that's $1 million question. I'm like, I don't even know where to start. I mean, I have a lot of different answers for that. And so forgive the fact that I'm probably going to be all over a little bit. But, I think my number one thing I would want to say, when you're experiencing this and you're seeing this, is trust yourselves a bit. You guys know so much, and parenting, caregiving often is trial and error learning. It's how we roll. You have different kids. You're like, well, this worked with this kid, sure not working with this kid. So you switch gears, right? This is how we all kind of navigate the parental journey. And it's just magnified to the nth degree when you're dealing with an individual who's, neurodiverse. Like it's totally different then, right? And it's way more. But I think a lot of times, we leave caregivers feeling a little bit like, well, you're just the caregiver and let the professional tell you what to do, or, oh, now you're enabling, or now you're just being this, or like, I think we're sometimes a little bit dismissive. And I think sometimes caregivers experience as a result, like, oh, am I messing this? Like, I mean, we're naturally always going to worry about doing best by the kids and the people that we love. So I think there's self-doubt, and I think so part of it is have confidence in your caring. Have confidence in the way that you love and care for and accept your child, no matter what, because that really, really matters. And just being you and just being that space and being the landing pad, and even the one that kind of is still there after the storm as best you can be there, matters enormously. And so, I think that's really important. And I think the way that caregivers are wrapping around each other and providing that support and back and forth and ways to vet and bounce ideas is increasingly acknowledging and recognizing the expertise that comes from caring. And that no professional is going to be able to tell you about caring the way carers are going to tell you about caring. So I really think that there's something very powerful and special that's happening in that space. So I think, that's one kind of thing I hold. I think another thing that I often will say to folks and carers is, when we're struggling is always kind of circling back to what are our goals? What are we hoping for? Because I think sometimes we get distressed. I certainly know in my experience, with things in the moment or what's happening, and we focus very much on behaviors of concern because, of course, we're worried and we're concerned, and that's what we do. But I think, always kind of circling back to, okay, well, what am I actually hoping for? Like, where are we trying to go? And then, okay, how are these behaviors, these things, these brain-based differences interfering with our ability to navigate this particular path? Because sometimes if we circle back to our goals, we might say, oh, okay, the goal needs to change. Or I could start to say, why might this be a barrier? What is my child, my person, my adult communicating to me in their way about how we're making progress? Do we have to change direction? Do we have to change course? And I think that space of reevaluate, because that's harder. I think it's a harder space to hold because too often we're in the heat of the moment and we're just like, are you kidding, Jackie? I'm just trying to get through the day. And if you get to work with professionals and sit down with somebody, sometimes those supports can be around, okay, let's circle back to our goals. Like, where are we going here? And are there things that might help us identify, improve fit? And maybe what I'm thinking about and what my person is thinking about are somewhat different, and there's something that's missing in that translation. And so I think creating space for reevaluating where we're going also opens the door for thinking more about strengths, thinking about the whole person, and balancing that storyline around not only what am I trying to reduce or what am I trying to address, but what am I also trying to promote and what are we trying to work towards? Because then we're not just in problem solving mode all the time. Then we turn to a little bit solution seeking mode. And that doesn't solve everything, of course not, but it does sometimes give us a different kind of perspective that allows us to start thinking in a little bit different spaces when we have those moments. So in addition to all the amazing things that folks already do, I think just really acknowledging the intuitive and inherent skill and commitment and love that carers bring creates the foundation for growth for all kids, and without which we have a non-starter. So without you guys, we've got nothing. And then secondly, where possible, stepping back to that bigger goal picture that allows us to kind of think about, okay, how do we bring in strengths? How do we kind of change the storyline in order to work towards goals, not just work away from behavior?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. Gosh, thank you so much. Like I said, I could talk to you all day long. And I hope we get to talk again, because I've loved this so much, but we'll end it there because that was such great advice and encouragement for our parents and caregivers. And Dr. Jackie Pei, thank you so much for all you are doing on behalf of the FASD community there in Canada and around the world. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Sandra. And thank you for what you do for the podcast, for connecting caregivers, and for all of you listening. Thank you for what you're doing, caring for and loving, folks. And I just have so much respect and appreciation for everything that you guys do. And I look forward to staying in touch and hearing from folks. And if there's ever any questions or wonders, never hesitate to shoot me an email.
All right. Oh, can you give us your email before we wrap up?
I can do that. My email is jpei at U as in university, Alberta,
And we'll put a link in the show notes because that would be a great way for them. That'll be the easy way to find you. So thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for being with us again today, Dr. Pei. My
pleasure. Thank you very much. Take care.
Oh my goodness. Wasn't that amazing and informative? Love Dr. Jackie Pei. And I hope that you got something out of this episode today, because we want to encourage you. We want to equip you for this adoption and foster care journey that we are on. Again, as a mom of 2 young adults with fetal alcohol syndrome, I'm passionate about, providing you with all of the education and the training and the information that you need in your parenting journey. And even so much of what we said, again, even if you don't know if your child was prenatally exposed, or maybe they were not, but of course there's trauma there. A lot of those behaviors are symptoms of the trauma. And regardless of what's going on, or if you get a diagnosis or not, it's that roadmap, it's that plan that we need to support our kids so that they can be successful. So such a wealth of information there. I hope that you enjoyed it. If FASD does resonate with you, if you think that's possibly what is, maybe going on in your family, with your kiddos, reach out. We have the support group, we have the trainings, we have this podcast. Go to our website, justicefororphansny.org, where you can connect with all of those things. Find us on social media. The link is in the show notes to our website, and I'll put in Dr. Jackie Pei's email if you have a question that you can send directly to her. And continue to listen to this podcast. Reach out, let us know if you need anything. My email is in the show notes as well. So again, thank you so much for listening. I'm grateful that you spent your valuable time with me today. I just pray that you got something super helpful out of it, and that you're encouraged to stay the course on your parenting journey. Have a great one, and see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, brought to you by Justice for Orphans. We hope you were encouraged today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, and share it with your fellow foster and adoptive parent friends so they can be encouraged too. Be sure to find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Justice for Orphans, and check out our website for vital resources at justicefororphansny.org.